All right, thank you everybody for listening in to Let's Get Real with Joseph KG. Again, just a reminder, as you heard in the intro, the purpose of this podcast is to do nothing but bring you value. And the way we do that is by sharing people's stories. They get real with us. They share what they've been through, how they've overcome. And one thing I found, it's in people's stories and the things that they dealt with that we really get the value, we get the nuggets. And today I'm actually excited to introduce Andrea. Andrea, what's up?
How are you? Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm fired up. I know when we originally talked and I called you, we were like recording a podcast. You were just fired up to share your stuff.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. If it could help somebody, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. Sure. Let people know a little bit about what you're doing now. Like, who is Andrea today? What is she involved in? You know, just a quick little synopsis of who you are today.
Okay. So, I've been thinking about it. Well, first and foremost, I'm free. I'm free from the obsession to drink and drug after many years of that. But heavily involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, submersed in that. I have a sponsor. I sponsor as many women as I can. My schedule just opened. I've been praying and praying. I was stuck at a job for years. It was a family business, and I've been praying, God, what do you want me to do? I know this isn't it. I know it's not it. And he just opened the floodgates, and I've been doing street ministry for about 5 years of my sobriety. And the street ministry that I have been going out with, they merged with another place called Villages of Hope, and the doors are flying wide open in January. So I'll go work with them. Yeah. I'm actually going to get paid to do my dream job. And so there were other opportunities that kept coming at me during these prayers to God, like, what do you want me to do? I know this isn't it. You know, there was financial insecurity, there was fear, there was worry, and I was gripping on to stuff like that. And I don't know, he was holding out for the dream job. And so I started in January, and I can't believe it.
That's awesome. So how long have you been sober?
7 years.
7 years.
Just picked
and
up
when
7.
you say, congratulations on that. That's huge.
God is good.
Absolutely. I know that's right.
It's not me.
And when you say street ministry, tell us a little bit about what do you mean by that? Because some people hear street ministry and they're like, what, are you like standing on the corner screaming Jesus? What do you mean by street ministry?
So I have a hard time sitting on my hands in AA meetings waiting for broken people to come in the doors because I was never going to stumble into an AA meeting to get sober at the level of the bottom that I hit. And so at 2 years sober, that was when I was mentally and emotionally ready to go back out, you know, through the step work, through seeds that had been planted through strong women in recovery. It finally became real, like I'm ready to go back out there because I ended up on the street myself. I was in a dark, dark place for many years. And someone reached out to me while I was out there. And so they asked me if I wanted to do it. I started doing it, and that's what we do. We go out, we find hurting, broken, addicted women. We scour the city of Jacksonville. We have bags, goodies, soap, toiletries, water. We pack a cooler. We give them cold drinks. And it's not like AA. When you're pouring time and steps into someone, it's a totally different platform. You're coming in, you're breaking the darkness just for a second. You know, they're won over out there. They're completely submersed in addiction. It's the deepest level I think you could go to besides dying. There's really nowhere else to go but up or die. And so what we do is I take a team of women and we look for them and we go and we stop them and we approach them with the goodie bags, which breaks the ice, and the cold drink. And, you know, a lot of them are skeptical. They think we're the police. You know, I was putting a magnet on my car that said Grace Ministries just so they knew I wasn't the police because I used to drive a Tahoe. Oh. And so we just go in and we just say, look, you're not forgotten. You know, we love you. God loves you if you ever need help. And we have cards with our names and our numbers, and we wait, and we put their names on prayer lists, and we wait. And then we get them in the appropriate setting, detox, rehab, you know, whatever it is. And, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
When I first talked to you about, you know, because again, I love bringing people on here to tell their stories and what are the things they learn in their stories. And immediately you and I got into like a 10-minute conversation. And, you know, when somebody talks about something they love, and even now, like as you talk to them, like you're lighting up, you're on fire for it. And it's your passion. It seems like you're living in your purpose right now.
I am absolutely in my purpose, finally. Yeah. I mean, and it took me years to get here. And so what I would say to anybody who is struggling to find theirs, the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous created the person that I am to fulfill that. It's like the continuous surrender to God's will and the continuous uncovering the layers of who I really am. It just has been setting me up the whole time to surrender to whatever it is he wants. And here it is. This is it. And I am, 5 years doing that, I have never felt so passionate. The passion is growing, and that's how I know it's definitely on purpose. This is definitely where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Exciting.
Yeah, I mean that's what people are looking for. It's where am I supposed to be? Where do I find it? And I always tell people it's when you have joy and you wake up and you're so fired up. Like I was pumped to come here and hear your story. And when I go to talk to people that are struggling, it's like it's a new drug.
Yeah.
And so you went to street ministry because I heard you mention that it's something that you were in.
Yes.
You struggled with that. Tell us, so now we kind of know the things you're involved in now, but being sober, you said 7 years now. You just picked, we were at your 7 year the other day. That's
7
true.
years.
Tell us a little bit about how you got there, like what you were obviously on the streets. You were struggling with addiction. Tell us a little bit about your background of how you got there.
So how I got there was just exactly what they say in the rooms. It's a progressive disease. It started just like everybody else. We're just partying. And for me, it developed over 22 years. The last 10 years, it got extremely dark. It started with alcohol and then drug use, and it just got as bad as it could get. The last 5 years, for 5 years, I was in a vehicle, just breaking the law left and right, no home, just in a vehicle. And then the last 5 years, I was completely out there alone by myself, walking around just completely hopeless, broken, destroyed. Through the steps, I've learned that self-will put me there. I did that, and for a long time, I believed that it was just a run of things that happened when I was young, or I would never really take ownership of why I got there. And I learned through the steps. I got there because of my choices. But at some point when I got out there, I was consumed. There was no getting out on my own. I could not stop because I had an extreme spiritual experience while I was there. And it basically woke me up. God met me right where I was at. I was crossing over a church, and it was like somebody flipped a switch. Excuse me. And now I'm awake. Now I'm struggling, but it's like I remember God all of a sudden, but I can't stop getting high. And so now I want to stop, but now I can't. That's the first time I wanted to stop, and I don't know how long.
And how long into this was that?
We're 8 years into the darkness, but I'd been out there. I'll spend 2 more years on the street after he woke me up. I'm telling you, this spiritual experience was profound. It was so on purpose. It literally changed the trajectory of my entire life.
So when you say spiritual experience, like I may understand, but some people are like, what? Did like a beam of light come shining down on you? What happened there that you were still lost? Your eyes were opened. So tell us what happened. What do you mean by that?
So I was raised in church. You never had to convince me there was a God or anything deeper than that. I believed, and I loved him, and I talked to him, and I knew him. I was always straddling the fence because I couldn't stop drinking or drugging, and I never felt good enough to be in church. But I've always thought about him my whole life, except this last 5 years on the street. I was completely won over. I never even thought about him. And I was walking past a church one day, and I had to cross the church to cop dope on the other side of the church. And the church was doing an outside service, like on a bullhorn, trying to pull in people like me, trying to reach. And I'd passed this church many times, and I passed it while they were doing this outside service. And it never affected me, never one way or the other. So I thought it was like any normal day. I've done this 1,000 times, walked past this church. And I walked past the church that day, and as soon as I hit the radius of the church, something came over me, a physical feeling of God. I knew it was God. I knew it was the Spirit of God. And tears started streaming down my face. I could not control it. I don't know if you know anything about street life. You cannot cry on the street. And so there were people everywhere. And so I was halfway in the experience and halfway out. I was trying to wipe my tears, but I couldn't. Nothing would break what he was doing. Nothing could overcome that. He was contacting me. He was like, and he said to me, and I'll never forget it. And every time I tell my story in AA, I say this because it's the turning point. He just said as clear as day. He said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I mean, and in that moment, I realized I hadn't. I had completely not remembered the God that I believed in my whole life. And so from that moment on, it was just miserable to be high. And, I was fully well aware of him and fully well aware of the fact that I could not stop. And now I want to stop, but I can't. It's very hard. I come on things like this. I speak at meetings. I go into halfway houses. I go into rehab centers looking for that one woman who just can't get over what it feels like to come from that place. The shame, the regret, and the remorse that comes along with that level of using, when you're down in the trenches that deep. It's not like a matter of, okay, yeah, I want to get clean, take me to detox. It's what comes next. Now I'm still me. Now I have to engage with people within society. My reputation is annihilated. The shame, the regret, the remorse, the guilt, all of it is so consuming. And I just refuse to stay quiet about it because I want women to know that there is life after that. There is, and I am proof. Thank God for the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. They've assisted me in working through every single emotion that was, I truly thought would dictate my life for the rest of my life. But there's no dictation from them at all. By asking him for nothing but his will, I've just been surrounded by people who could care less, my husband included. It's my past is my past, and this is where I'm at right now. And so I don't scream it from the rooftops on every platform, but if I can reach out to a woman and just say, man, if you just come over here, I will love on you. You can have my number. I will get you through it. I will pray over you. We can hang out, and that's what it is. I'm not going to push my higher power down your throat. I'm not going to push anything down your throat. I just want you to know that we are the same. You can get through it if I could get through it. It's extremely important for me to get out there.
And I'm thinking back to that spiritual experience before that. You said you knew God, and we're going to talk a lot about God today because, but in both of our lives, we didn't have God, or God was there. We never connected with him, and we were lost. And once we opened our eyes and he opened our eyes and we reached out, and it's almost like you said it perfectly. We could see now. Before that, you said you knew God. And do you feel like you were just ignoring it because you were stuck in your story and in your misery? Like, what was it? Like, yes, you heard him. He spoke to you. But besides that, do you feel like there was a change in you before that? Like, why before? Do you think he was trying to speak to you? You were ignoring it, or you were just completely like, I don't want to hear it because of the, like, what was, tell me, do you know a little bit about that?
No, I was completely shut off.
Yeah.
Completely shut off. There was no him tapping. There was no effort. There was no one on the street speaking life or about him. In some circles, it was an absolute abomination. How dare you disrespect God talking about him while we're getting high? Because I heard it brought up. And so it was just taboo. You don't talk about God on the street. No one's talking about God. And that's why it's so important. But I was completely submersed, Joseph, completely no thought of him at all. And I think that's part of the story. I was completely in bondage to the fact of I wasn't even thinking about him. He wasn't a thought. It wasn't that he wasn't pursuing me. He was probably there, but I truly was such a fiend. It was go to the next hit, go to the next drink, constant. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important for me to go back and break the darkness. I have to let these women know that they're not forgotten. No matter what they've done, they can come back from it, and they're forgiven. All they have to do is ask, and we can assist them in any way they need. Yeah. Through housing, clothing, counseling, help them get a job, whatever resource would be needed. So That's why I have to keep going back.
Yeah, and it's because you were there. Like the light. I mean, you're wearing a shirt that says "Be the Light," and I'm just thinking how perfect that is for your story. Because the light, when the light was turned on, it was almost like you just needed somebody to turn on the light. And even going back into prisons for me is where I'm going now. And I think about that. Like, you have a story, I have a story. Everybody has a story where God shined His light. But if we're not taking that light back to those places, what are we doing with it? We're just consuming it ourselves. You know what I mean? Now tell me about so when the light turned on and you heard God speak, you said there was 2 years of it was almost like what you're doing, that you were starting to feel the guilt. What are some things you experienced there? Because now you're like, I'm still using and I know I'm not supposed to be. And how did that get you to a place where it's like, I got to completely give this up? Because there's some people out there still now, or maybe they're not dealing with addiction, but they're still stuck. And maybe they're reaching for God and they think, well, my life is in shambles, and they have shame as well. You talked about shame, and they're dealing with that stuff. And maybe they haven't seen the light. Maybe right now is the first time they ever thought about that light. How did you get from I see the light to now I'm going to start following it and really start building that relationship?
No, it was torture. The next 2 years are going to be torture for me, because now all I can think about is God, but I can't stop getting high. And I would argue with him, like, how are we going to get out of this? I want to be out. I want to be out. What are we going to do? I can't do it. And so I was already admitting I was powerless to the Father. I was already walking around, and nobody would get high with me because I couldn't stop thinking or talking about God, but I could not stop getting high. So I was like a buzzkill. So I was just a nutcase, and it was almost like borderline mental illness, because I just, my mother had Marchman acted me several times in the years past, and none of it worked. But he put it in her heart for one last time. She Marchman acted me that one last time, and I know it was because he put it in her heart to do it. She had all but given up on me. My entire family had all but given up on me. Police had gone to their store, their business, and said, we're sorry. She's not going to come back from this, and we're so sorry. And so I just know it was the power of God that compelled her to do it, and she did it one last time, and that's who I am. I have to be mandated. No matter what my strongest desire within my soul to quit a drug is, I still have to be forced to go get help. And that's why I give so many women grace. Like, I get it. It's so hard to get up and move and do it right now. That's why when we go on the street, you have a small window. If they won't help, I've got to run and go get it right then and there, because that's such a small window, because it's such a power. That dope is so powerful. And so for anybody struggling, it's truly just taking a step, no matter how it feels. But I truly I was forced to go. But I will say this, in my defense on that particular question, when someone's, if I were to encourage someone to just take the step, no matter how it feels, when I got into rehab, I was mandated to be there. And every fiber of my being, my flesh, everything inside of me wanted to run. I knew I needed help. I knew I wanted help. I knew I didn't want to go back where I came from, but I did not know how to be me. And to be in that rehab with all these women, stuck with who I was, what I'd been doing, the misery of it, I just looked at God yet again. And I said, dude, I can't do this. Like, here we go again. I need you yet again. I cannot stay here. I don't want to be here. And I promise you, just like that, I ended up staying at that rehab facility for 5 more months after that 30 days, so a 6 month total. And it was all him. It had nothing to do with me. And it's okay to look at God and say, I can't. Yeah. You're going to have to come in at some point, even if it's not through the steps. Just get real. Just get real, and you're only doing one day at a time. You're just trying to get through one day at a time. And I started following instructions. I got a sponsor. I started doing that 3rd step prayer, and it started working. It did not start working immediately, but it did eventually turn into something beautiful. But it started very robotically, very disconnected. Even though I believed in him, even though I had the spiritual experience, even though all these factors, I still had issues connecting with the God of my understanding because of my lack of confidence. Why would he love me? He doesn't love me. It was a huge self-blocker. I could not receive his love because I didn't feel like I deserved it. And so just by robotically following instructions, because the desperation drove me there, I cannot go back to where I was. And so I'll just play your game. I'll do what you asked me to do. I don't have any other options. Yeah. And so I just started following instructions, and it's just been the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, I love what you said about, because, I mean, some people have a struggle because I've been thinking about shame a lot, you know, as we talk to people. And, I mean, even myself, we're sober 5 years, 7 years, and there's still shame. You know, there's still sometimes that shame, and that's such a big word for people. Now, we have tools. We've built a relationship. But obviously, probably going into the street, back into the streets, what are things that you find, like, it's probably a really tough thing because like what you said, there's people who are saying, but God, how did you love me? And now you're going in there and trying to tell them God loves you, and especially with people who, whether they're on the streets or they've dealt with pain, they've dealt with loss, and they say, but how could God, what are things you experience on the streets? And I'd love to hear that, because you're going in the trenches. I mean, I always say that's in the trenches, which is where you're supposed to be. You know, that's when Jesus came, he was in the trenches.
Amen.
So you're in the trenches. What are some things that you deal with? How are you helping these women to deal with that stuff?
You know, it's all just a 5-minute deal. You go in with a little bit of nerve because I know exactly where they're at. And I know exactly what I would feel if women would come up to me. Like, the church would come, and you look at them like, oh, God, here they come. And all you're trying to do is get high. And so I go in knowing that, but I go in with the Spirit of God. I go in covered. I bring him with me. We're not going in alone. We are prayed up, and we've been praying for weeks up to the point that we go. And it's evident that he's there. It's evident. These women are broken. You can see the pain in their eyes. I have watched countless women soften just like that and just start immediately crying, because we are not just bringing ourselves. We're bringing the love of a Father that has sent us there. And so after getting that response for so many times, you just know that, and maybe 1%, and there's not no exceptions. Some women are just like, absolutely not. And it's very, very small. It's a very small percentage of those that don't receive it at all. But I'd say 98% of the women that we encounter for just 5 minutes, that's really all we get, because they've got to go get high again. They just like little babies. They start crying. They let us pray over them. They hug us. Yeah. And they cry. They cry, you know. And I know that when I walk from there, I know that I've done a well job for him. I've been out there. It's like evil has its reign out there, and you're just following orders, whatever you want us to do, God. And I make sure to tell him I don't believe in things happening just by coincidence. I know that when we're taking real time to pray for these women before we go, that it's no mistake we've met them. And I tell him that. Do you think this is a mistake? He's searching you out. He's looking for you. He found you today, you know, and that really, I can feel that is true. And I know that he lets them know that's true.
Yeah. So in the moment. Do they ever come with you? Like, cause as you're saying, like, you know, I know me, when I was in my addiction and I was lost, I would have these, even my lawyer used this when I got arrested. I was sitting in my car, sleeping in my car. My parents wouldn't let me in their house. I'm still getting high. I'm thinking about who I'm going to steal from next. Mm-hmm. And for some odd reason, I play this Christian song, and it says, "If We Ever Needed You" by Casting Crowns. And I remember I played the song, and I was like, in that moment, I was like, God, I need you so bad. And I wrote a little journal, and it was like, you can call it a spiritual experience. I felt God's presence, but it wasn't enough. I ignored it because of the shame. Are the women, like, is it a prayer and they go on? Is there things that you're able to possibly reconnect with these women to see transformations? Or is the purpose of just giving them the hope and letting them know someone's here? You know, how are you able to connect with these women as they go through this stuff?
It's rare. It's rare that anyone's going to stop, but it has happened, and there's nothing more frustrating than someone wanting it right now, and me not being able to provide a bed and detox, and so that's the problem we're having. So, I mean, it's all been working out. I had one girl call me, and I mean, we had literally played in the pool all day. We were exhausted. Got on the couch. I was totally ready to just chill. The phone rang. She's ready to go right now. I called detox. She's ready to get in right now. It was an absolute miracle. And I went and got her and she went in. And so that's unheard of. And I think after having that experience with that one girl, I realized, when it's supposed to happen like that, it's going to happen like that.
Yeah.
When the timing is all in God's timing. But yeah, we're basically just passing out hope and goodies. We're giving them hope, and the seeds that I plant, I know that God is capable of watering them, and it's a great exercise of releasing control.
Yeah.
Yes, we take these women home with us. Yes, we think about them, but once I've met them and start praying for them, they're in the Father's hands, and He loves them more than I ever could. But we write their names down, and I do have women call me back, and I am fully equipped to get them wherever they need. Completely equipped, and will be more so in January.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that. And I'll say this: I admire that because, a lot of people are trying to do what God called them to do, and they want to see. I struggle with that. I remember when I first sponsored guys. I sponsored 3 men at the same time. We all had a little group, and they all went back out, and I was angry. And I remember somebody telling me you're just sponsoring people because you just want to give them their 1-year chip and you want to see the trend. I said, yes, I want to see them change. It was the truth.
Yeah.
I want to know what I'm doing. And then he said exactly what you said. He said, oh, so you're trying to be God and your job is just to plant seeds, and you may never see that fruit grow, but it was a seed that you planted. And it's kind of cool when you think of that. You said it perfectly. I let go. I always say it's like being a rowboat with God. I'm going to row and let God steer.
Yeah.
And if anytime I try to steer, I'm doing God's job. I would love to go back to when you started to deal with the shame. What are some things you uncovered? I think that's going to help a lot of people talk about whether it's going through the steps, things that you learned about yourself. That, hey, you wanted to run. Thank God that He left you and you didn't run. What are some things you uncovered that you were running from? Some things you learned about yourself to help you just kind of hold on. And what are some things you learned there?
No, I believe with all my heart that pain and shame, all kinds of things come out sideways, many other ways. And luckily, Alcoholics Anonymous assists with that, right? So if I'm angry, and that's really what I've been for years, I've been angry. And that's pain or trauma or anything underlying just coming out sideways. It demands to come out, whether it comes out in fear or anger. And that's why I've always said from the womb, I've always needed AA, even before I took my first drink or drug. I needed it because, one, I was born an alcoholic, but two, after things started happening at a young age, I think anger started building up. Anger. And so the steps of AA assist in peeling that onion back, just unlayering. I want to know who I am. I don't want false pride. I spent years in recovery. I'm like, it was just such a miracle for me to be sober. I couldn't believe I was sober, and for a while that was enough. I was like, good job. You're freaking awesome. You're sober.
Yeah.
That was just enough. But through, needing to make amends, being angry. Now I've been saying the 3rd step prayer long enough that being mad at so-and-so does not feel good anymore, right? It's like God will not allow the two in the same spirit. I can't be pissed and trying to do God's will, surrendering to Him to every day, and it just starts to feel wrong, right? And so those loving convictions through the 3rd step prayer, and good sponsorship leads me to take a look at me, continuously take a look at me. I am the problem. And to lay down the shame and the regret. I got rooted in some really good book studies from a church. That was another thing that I did early on. I needed to find out who I was to God. And so I remember looking at other women in the program, even women who weren't in the program. I was struggling so much with the shame and the regret and the remorse of my past that it would come out everywhere I went. Like, how do you deal with it? I don't know how to deal with it. I don't even understand. And I just kept staying sober one day at a time. So it was like God had his hand on it, but I was still going through it. And thank God for the steps. Because eventually, once you write enough down, once you are aggravated enough, once you are in fear enough, you will start doing the work. You will start writing down, taking a deep look at yourself. And then you'll start to understand. Well, I started to understand, okay, you're shameful for something that you would never have done unless you were inebriated to the point of beyond blackout. And, I was carrying shame for doing, things, but, it was all in deep-seated alcoholism and addiction. Yeah. I've never stole a dime sober. Right. I wasn't homeless before I started drinking. I mean, these were things that I had to, it was all God assisted and all AA assisted. There was no way. And many, many strong spiritual women assisted, people who would speak truth into me. I would call them with the lie. And I wouldn't identify it as a lie, but they would, right?
What do you mean by that?
I would call them and say, this is the way I feel.
Yeah.
This is how I think I'm perceived. This is, I feel like I'm a piece of crap or whatever I was struggling with at that moment. And they would say, no, this is the truth about who you are, and then they would quote scripture. They would, whatever it was, they would feed me truth. They would thwart the lies that because it's a battlefield of my mind. In my mind, I think I'm all of these things. And in my mind, I don't think I'm worthy of love. I don't think that I'm worthy of the forgiveness. And I just didn't do it alone. So my strongest recommendation, don't go in this alone. Don't sit in your head. Don't allow the lie to just circle and like a shark. It's just going to keep until it devours you. Come out of your head. When you're new at a meeting, if you do end up in an AA meeting, when you're new, raise your hand, tell them you're new. Get the numbers. And I had to make the phone calls. In order to get up out of self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I was saying this the other day. I said, I remember being on drugs. I used drugs because I wanted to change the way I felt.
Right.
So when I woke up and I was sick and I was dope sick, I didn't just call one guy. I would I would literally go to the dead ends of the world. I was telling my wife last night, I was like, I would knock on a guy's door because I had to go to a meeting, like we were going to a convention out of town, and he told me he'll wake up at 7:30. I knock on the door and the drug dealer didn't wake up, and I go around and I see his windows cracked open with AC, and I crawl in his window to wake him up, and he was like, what the heck? I said, you didn't wake up. I went to those lengths to use a drug because I wanted to change the way I feel. So why am I now sober, trying to get sober, and not taking that same action?
Such a good way to explain it. So good. Spot on.
What would you say? I mean, I know the answer. I'd love to hear your perspective. Why do you feel people don't want to deal with their shame? What holds people back from getting real? There's a lot of people right now that are listening to this. I believe every human being almost is dealing with something, and they're not opening up. They're not getting real. The shame is too strong for them to want to share it with somebody else. And you were there at some point, so maybe you can just share why you didn't do it, or what are your thoughts that you're experiencing now working with women that you're seeing of why people are afraid to deal with their shame and actually look inside of themselves.
Well, it's pride.
Yeah.
It's pride, and it's false pride. Sometimes I can forget where I came from. And I think I'm better than I really am, but truly you can't save your butt and your face at the same time. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to, insanity's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If you've never told anybody you're crap and you're so scared, then maybe that's it. Maybe you're going to have to set the pride aside. And it is a lack of faith, That's why it's just the steps are in order. Say the third step prayer. Ask to be placed in his will. Doesn't matter what that looks like or feels like. If I don't have willingness, I pray for willingness. If I know there's an area in my life that's lacking and I don't want to do it, I pray for that. I'm powerless. I'm powerless over everything until I tap in. But I'll never forget the first time, because I got sober in rehab. I had a counselor. I utilized her for 18 months, private sessions. And I had to have the hard conversations. And I had to be exactly who I was in front of her. I couldn't go, when I left that room, I was whoever I wanted them to think I was. They didn't know the hardest, darkest parts of who I was, but she was about to get it all. And it was not easy, but I had tried every which way. I've definitely tried it my way for too long. And I remember reading it in the book. Many of us tried to avoid this humbling step. And almost always, we invariably always got drunk if we avoid telling someone all of our life story. And, find a licensed counselor. They're bound by law. They can't tell your crap. Get it out.
Yeah.
I take meetings into a rehab, and I tell them that all the time. Start there. Don't start with a sponsor. If it's that daggone hard, and there's all kinds of different helplines and stuff. Just get it out.
Yeah.
It's got to come out. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. You said it, pride. My wife and I were driving to Destin, and it was like a 5-hour conversation. And I told Heidi, I said she's going to be on this podcast, and that's because she just says things that like blow my mind. And it was, people are so afraid to be honest with other people because they're like, I don't want you to think I have real things going on. I don't want you to think my life is not perfect. And I want to keep this perfect image. Yeah. I want everybody to think that I got it and I have it figured out. And I find when you're doing that, even myself, if I'm not being honest with other people, I'm starting to lose myself. I'm not becoming authentic to who I am, which is who God created me to be. So if I can't be honest with another human being, that means I'm not being honest with myself, and that's a scary thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very scary thing.
Absolutely. I always tell girls when I start sponsoring, please don't tell me who you want me to think you are. We're going to go down the wrong road for too long if you present yourself to me in one way and that's not the real deal, then we're just going to go the wrong way. For how long will we go the wrong way? Yeah. Just spit it out. And I love it that it got as bad as it did, because a lot of women do, I think, because of my story, they realize, I can tell her anything. And so I'm honored to have that now. I'm honored to wear that for them, and it wasn't like that at the beginning. Trust me, that was all through step work. But I remember at the beginning, I was like, yep, it was bad, and now it's good. That was about as much as I wanted to give anybody about my story. But through the steps, you start realizing, wow, this is helping women. Women are connecting with me, and they're saying things that make me, I'm not extremely proud of it all, but, God chose for me to go down that road and save me from it. And like you said earlier, I'm not putting it in a box. I just refuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you went back to, let's call it 18-year-old self or the time in your life when you were really like, you knew I'm gone, if that makes sense. If you could speak to that same girl right now, what would you tell her?
Oh, God. I wouldn't have listened.
Yeah.
Period. I know she wouldn't have listened. If I could have said something to her, she wouldn't have listened.
Yeah.
I am that girl. I have to touch the stove, by God. I've got to touch it.
Yeah.
You can tell me it's hot, but I have to touch it.
You have to go experience
it. I have to get burnt. And so I would just tell her, you're about to go through the darkest time in your life, but God has great things for you. And your story is going to help people. And don't waste it. Mm-hmm. And He's never going to leave you. But get ready, girl. It's about to be a bumpy ride. You're about to go through it to get to it, And that's okay. I wouldn't change a thing except for my daughter. That's my only regret is, I left her for so long. And but again, God has restored it beyond anything I hoped for. I just wanted a small piece of her life, but now we're best friends today.
Yeah. How old when you were in your active addiction when you had her?
Yeah. Well, I quit everything. I was 23. Okay. And so it was the first time I ever quit. And that's pretty much what led me to the deepest depths of the addiction. From 15 to 23, drinking and using the entire time. And then I got pregnant. And now I had to experience sobriety because I still wasn't so far gone that I was like, no, I'm quitting everything. So I quit cigarettes, I quit alcohol, I quit coffee, I quit drugs, I quit it all for 9 months. And I'm here to tell you that was the most miserable 9 months of my life. And from that moment on, once I had her, I said, I will never be sober again, ever, because that was miserable. That was the most miserable. And so that experience led me to the depths of hell, because I did not know what AA had to offer. I did not know that there was true freedom. And you will not get freedom by osmosis. You will not get freedom by wanting it or wishing it. every bit of freedom that I've gotten within Alcoholics Anonymous, I have worked for and showed up for and taken action to get it, every bit of it. Mm-hmm. So.
Did you, I want to talk about that because how long was she not in your life and when did you reconnect with her?
This is a biggie. Talk about regret. This is where the regret comes in. 10 years.
Okay.
5 to 15. And so when I came in, oh, wow. I not only dealt with the shame of where I just came from, which was consuming. I was dealing with being a fourth wheel because my stepfather and my mother raised her. And so it was the three of them for 10 years. And here I am. Mm-hmm. Here I am. I don't even know how to be in this equation. And so only by the grace of God was I able just to push through no matter how it felt. I felt inadequate in every way, everywhere we went. I was just the mom that left the kid in my mind. And that, again, there's one of those lies. Mm-hmm. I would call the women in my life, this is how I feel. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I don't deserve her. They had their own jokes. They had their own thing. They all knew each other so well, and I was like an alien in their lives. And thank God for the fellowship. Oh, my goodness. They were my immediate family and still are. I'm still very close to many of the people God placed in my life from the very beginning. But yeah, to maneuver through that type of awkwardness, and it was like what I had done to my child was on spotlight 24/7, and I couldn't. But God just slowly but surely, her and I got closer and closer and closer, and oh man, it's better than I never thought it would get this good. I was just wanting a piece of her, mm-hmm. but I got so much more. Yeah. I got so much more.
Yeah. And even now, as you say that you regret it, I'd have to tell you, like I say this to parents all the time, and I look at my life and like my mom and dad were in my life and did everything in their human power to raise me to be a good kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But God, and people hear this and are like, what are you trying to say? And I says, look, addiction was the best thing that's ever happened to me. Going to prison 2 separate times was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm able to pour into my kids' lives now. And even like I have 3 children, Heidi has had 3 children from a previous marriage. My dad was there, but he was working. So the experiences that I dealt with, they actually happened for me. Yeah. It's because now as I'm raising my children, I'm looking back at this is what I want to become. These are the goods. I look back at my parents, I don't think there's anything. That was one thing they battled with was, could we have done something different to stop this? And I remember when I came home and I truly, truly made an amends. And it was like the first time I really opened up with my dad and said, hey, I just want you to know there was nothing you could have done to change God's plan, but it's all going to work. It's all going to work. You have your son today at 26. Thank God I'm not 35, 45, 55. I'm dead. I'm alive today. I got God in my life. It's going to work out. So I would tell you that it's almost... It's an amazing thing that's happened for her, that God's going to use. And I mean, just like you said, you were able to use that relationship. And there's probably women you run to now that have dealt with. Do you ever deal with that of women who maybe have regrets of how they were a mother and you're able to share with them how your relationship was restored? Have you encountered anything like that?
Oh yeah. So I've been going to the same rehab center for 6.5 years, mm-hmm. that I left from bringing a meeting in, and somewhere in that, something said, your daughter needs to speak. Because the facility is a women and children's facility, and all these mothers have very small children. And I wanted to give my child a voice in that facility. And, of course, I talked to her about it, and I've been sober maybe 2-3 years at this point. And I said, would you like to tell your side of the story? And she said, yeah, I would. And so she's probably done that about 5 or 6 times. She goes in there and she gives her account of what it feels like to be left by her mom. And I take it like a champ because I know that these women need to hear the effect that they're having on their children. My head used to lie to me and tell me that she was better off without me. And my daughter just comes in like a lion and says, no, ma'am, they're not better off without you. Mm-hmm. And so we squashed that lie right then and there in that room. We normally have the men come in as well because they're strongly affected by it. there's not a dry eye in the place. And so it's been an honor and a joy and a pleasure to get her side of it and to see the lives that the seeds she's planting. That's it. I don't know. Like, we're not really, and we've had plenty of women come back and say, I will never forget what you're doing. I will never forget that change. So yeah, you do get a little bit of feedback there, but we walk away knowing that we're planting seeds, for those children. Yeah. And there's nothing I can do to change her childhood, but I think it gives her an outlet, and it's all whenever she wants to do it. It's pretty intense.
I think that's really cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, it's amazing how I always say this every time I get on this podcast about this shirt that Heidi made me, that if you hide your story, you hide God's glory. Mm-hmm. And I love people who are living in their story. Yeah. And you are living in your story. I mean, you're using everything that's happened to you and like going back in the streets, and even to the extent of your daughter is now able to share her part of her story, and you're allowing her to live her truth. Yeah. And I think that's huge. Yeah. I think that's massive. So tell me, I know me and you talked a little bit about what you're doing also, like what God's doing, because there's some amazing things. I mean, look, you've overcome, you've got your daughter back in your life, you're going into the trenches, and you're literally just, and I love that you plant seeds. I think that's something I'm taking away from this, because I'm always just trying to give, and I'm like, I'm hoping this is doing something. God, if you want me to do this, I'm going to keep going. And I love to know that it's like when somebody says, like when I saw you and Allie connected, I was fired up. It was like a God thing. I was like, yes, all right, God, that's awesome. You're doing something with this. So right now you're doing some amazing stuff to actually help the women in the streets find a place. Tell us how that has come about.
So it's not actually me. So Carla Sweeney, she founded, I think 5-6 years ago, the Awakenings House, and somewhere down the line, and then she's helped so many women. And I've always known her and always respected her, but she merged with another wonderful woman named Donna, and they have merged together, and they had a vision to, where are we going to put these women? Because Donna and Carla merged with Grace Ministries, and that's who Grace Ministries actually found me on the street, Kathleen McDaniel. And so Kathleen McDaniel and Carla and Donna, they merged their ministries. And so it started with Grace, and then it turned into Carla and Donna had a vision for where are we going to take these women? We're going out to find them on the street, but what are we going to do when, And so they started praying about it, and their vision was very large, and they were going to start big, and God had other plans. And so they bought 1 acre and a third, and there was a house on that property. They've renovated that property, and piecemealing donations, piecemealing fundraisers, piecemealing money to get this done, and through prayer and through just trusting God. We're going to let you build this. And their vision was renovate the community center and start in the back of the property behind that community center for these women to come, 16 tiny homes. And each home would hold 2 women, so that's 36 women, or 32 women. And they were having, again, to piecemeal it, build, one home at a time. And one home is not even built yet. And they've been praying the whole time. It's their vision. They have adopted it. It's in their heart, and they're still doing fundraisers, and they're still praying for God to peep through. Well, I want to say it was a couple of months ago, we were informed that instead of having to piecemeal it, a local construction company asked to meet with them, and they have asked if they can finish each and every tiny home by January. I mean, from start to finish, the entire thing will be built in January. And Donna and Carla have asked me to come literally work for them, and instead they're going to pay me to go do my dream job. And so we've been networking, looking for, the hardest part of this situation is detox, finding beds and detox. That's a process. So we're just ecstatic, when people are ready and surrendered and say, God, here we are. And then you look at each other and you're like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? If you just sit back, he had plans for Jacksonville, and it's happening in this way. So we're excited. This is going to be a rest period for these women, a restoration period for these women. They'll bring counselors in. We're partnering with many different outlets in Jacksonville, Rethreaded, later down the line. I mean, we're actually taking a trip to Thistle Farms, which is the exact basic prototype for what we're doing, except it's in Nashville, Tennessee, and Thistle Farms has been there for 20 years. So we're all flying to Nashville very short this month, and we are going to do workshops, and we're getting equipped, and we're getting informed, and we're going through classes, CPR, whatever it takes to be locked and loaded for me to go get them and bring them back. And I go with teams of women. Right. I'm not going out by myself. I mean, I've got many, many God-fearing, loving women who have never been affected by addiction, have never, ever drank a day in their life, but God has just put the desire for these broken women in their hearts, and that alone is a whole nother experience, getting to meet and know these women too. So yeah, it's just been a wild, I just wanted to get off the street. I just wanted to get off the street, and now here I am just living God's best life for me.
Yeah. It's crazy. As you're talking, I just think about God, man. I think, my wife and I were talking about if you would have asked me 5 years ago to paint what I wanted in my life, I would have sold myself so short, not even close. And I wondered, like, as I love one thing that stands out about what you do is you plant seeds. I keep going back to this because I think a lot of times I talk about this a lot of being in your process, and it's almost God's process. And some people lose hope in the process because they don't see the fruit.
Right.
Did you ever go through that? Like, just doing street ministry, because I know you're in there and you're doing it because you do want to plant seeds, but you also are hoping and praying that these women see the light. And you never know if they do, so you almost have to let go and let God. Did you ever struggle with any of that in the beginning?
Yeah, it's a whole nother journey with the Father. It's a whole nother aspect of you dying to self and taking it, because it is real pain. The pain of knowing what I'm leaving them in is there. It's like you go into this spiral of, oh my Lord, I hope they don't get killed. And therefore in turn, yet again, I'm running back to Him. Therefore in turn, I'm saying, okay, now what are we going to do about the way this feels? And He's like, I got something for that too.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep pushing you. And then you share it. I share it with the other street ministry camaraderie. The people that are with me. I'm like, okay, I got this girl, and then we'll pray over her, and then we get peace. But yeah, I went through that with sponsoring for sure in the rehabs. Nobody was staying sober, but I was.
Yeah.
Nobody was staying sober, and to this day, 7 years later, I have 2 girls that I sponsor from that facility that are still sober. And then one girl didn't come from that facility, but I've got 3 that have been sober over some years, out of the countless. I mean, I had to change styles in sponsoring, because these people don't, they weren't utilizing me for the right reasons. They had to have a sponsor, and so I would just change up the style of it. But yeah, I did. I went through that, like, is it me? But not long. Not long. It's just, my sponsor kept reminding me, you're staying sober. Right. You're doing the footwork and you're staying sober. And I mean, I was so free from the obsession. So I was just like, something's got to be right here. Yeah. This has got to be right.
Yeah, especially being in the dark. Like I always tell people, people who've been in the dark, they appreciate the light.
In a car, in a bed, even today, everything I have. My husband and I look at each other because he was also getting high in abandoned houses, and we just can't believe the life we have. We just can't. Every day, it feels like yesterday I was rescued from that street. I cannot believe that I have a vehicle, a home. I cannot believe it.
Yeah. Let me ask if as you're on this journey where God has you, He's taking you, have you ever thought about how you want to be remembered, of what people are going to say about you, because you're living it right now, right? And you dealt with shame and you overcome it. I actually want to change that question too. Is there things you're still learning about yourself now that maybe you're struggling with today? Like simple things you're learning in this journey of, okay, this is a process that I'm learning right now, and this is what I'm learning about it.
Yeah, and I believe with all my heart, again, being placed in God's will, you are going to be dealt with on His time. Whatever I need to deal with, it's not going to happen if I'm not ready for it. And so I literally just got a counselor. as 7 years sober. And that was through step work. That was through something that I discussed with my sponsor. And, as a sober-minded person, I look back at that and I think, well, why didn't this happen? Because I wasn't ready then. And now I'm ready now. And so, there's still strongholds in my life. And I'm a busy person. I'm a busy when I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a busy crackhead, and I'm a busy alcoholic. But then when I get sober, I get busy and I run from the things that are still there, right. And the steps slow me down. My sponsor slows me down, and I lay it out on the line. Just a little more of that onion keeps coming back. And so I'm just a firm believer that, don't worry about what you think needs to be handled. I believe, since I've been asking God, I just want what you want, he's piecemealing me everything I need when I'm ready. Mm-hmm. So I just started counseling a couple weeks ago, and I will. And he's told me, he's like, it's I wasn't ready back then. I did do counseling in a different way when I was at Gateway, but it's not so much your obvious reasons. It's just stuff that's deeper, stuff we choose to stuff. I always tell my sponsees, we can run from all of these things. We can, even in sobriety, we can pile up all the good things that we do for others and avoid the hard, tough issues. But I think because I keep saying, God, I want your will, I can't run from him, and I can't run from his plan. And, at the beginning of that third step prayer, we say, my creator. And therefore, if you'll just stop and think about that, if he created me, I think he knows what I need. He knows the deepest, darkest parts of my heart that I'm running from. And I believe with all my heart that this new counseling adventure that I'm going on is all because I've been running, just trying to cover up with good things. You can cover up with good things or bad things. We drink over the top of shame and regret, and we can do good things over the top of shame and regret. But with continued prayer and step work, I'm telling you, you can't run from God and what he wants to be uncovered. You just can't.
And it's I remember talking to somebody when you get out of it, you're in your addiction, you get out of it, you deal with it, you go through the steps. Just, you said the word, it's never ending. And when you have a relationship with God, and I say this, my wife and I would talk about this all the time, is the closer I get to him, the more he shows me how messed up I am. Yes. He shows me areas in my life, and every time, if I get defensive with Heidi and I'll leave the house and I'm really angry, God's like, what'd you do? What was your part? And that's a recovery thing, right? Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I got mad at her because she got in my way of what I was supposed to do.
Blocked your goals.
I'm like, God, help me. Now all of a sudden I'm going to God saying, please help me to be less selfish. Please help me to be more giving to my wife. And it's like, I think that's where people have the struggle is you gotta die to yourself so you can see him. You know
Amen.
What I mean?
And it's such a process, especially at the beginning. Oh my gosh, to go against the grain of self. I've been doing whatever I want my whole life. Yeah. And all of a sudden y'all want me to do it this way. And at the end of the third step prayer, it says, think long and hard before you take this step. Think long and hard before you take this step, because you're going to lose some stuff. Meaning you're not going to be feeding your flesh anymore. Yeah. God's will, that's why they call it the road less traveled, because not everybody's running to die to self. It is not an easy journey, but oh my goodness, the beautiful part of it is, I wouldn't want it any other way. I'd do it again 1,000 times. I'd do it again 1,000,000 times just to get where I am right now. It has all been so worth it. It's the best journey, best ride of my life. I can't wait to see what's next. And, I like to get real specific in the 6th and 7th step. When I go to the Father with my we just generalize it. Here's my defects, good and bad. I like to call them out.
Tell people what that is, the 6th and 7th
So step. It's just, oh Lord.
Like your character defects.
Character defects. Yep. So 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. But in the 7th step prayer, I'm literally saying, God, please remove all these defects of character, good and bad. Well, I like to get specific with that prayer. I like to tell him, okay, yeah, I'm judgmental, or yes, I am insensitive, or yes. And I'm not going to find that without step work. I'm just not going to see it. Again, the pride covers it all up. And I always say this stopped being about sober a long time ago for me. Yeah. This is why I know I need AA, because even though I'm living in my purpose, even though I love his children, even though I want to suit up and show up for them, I didn't start wanting that. It took me a lot of work to get here, and I need a lot more work after that. I mean, I am just as messed up as the next person.
Yeah.
You know, and I have stuff with my husband, and we all do. We all have situations, circumstances that we're placed in that show us the darkest, like that. There you are. That's who you are. And it's like, ooh, I don't like the way that feels. God, I don't want to be that. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want to do that anymore. And so again, then I just go back to the 7-step prayer and I say, okay, here I am. I just did this, you know.
Man, it's just awesome to watch, just hearing all the stuff of you just doing God's work. And I think that's the biggest message right now is you just said, it's not me anymore, God. I'm going to let you. And like, it's amazing what happened. Like when you told me about what's going on over there, and then the people I'm just like, that's you planting seeds and doing God's work and saying, because if you would have done it, you would have been like, oh, I'll have this. How it wouldn't have been as great. Right. And I always say, if I envision it and I make the plan, like if I would have planned my life today, I would have sold myself short. Yeah. But I was just like, all right, God, if you want me to have a marriage, if you want me to have this, if you want me to have the bit, whatever you want me to have. And as I step into it, just allow it to be touched by you. Don't let me be the speaker. Don't let me be the one. Let somebody hear what they're going to. And that's the biggest thing of Let's Get Real. I want people to hear themselves in your story. I want them to hear something that they got from it and say, oh, wow, I was really resonated with it. Yeah. Before we end, the first thing you said to me when I talked to you was, if somebody hears this, I want to be able to connect with them. Yes. Can you, if somebody's listening right now, I know we've already talked of how I can connect with them. They can message me. Right. I can reach out to you. But what do you want to leave them with? That's going to be the last message we're going to leave this with. Okay. Before you say it, if somebody is listening, Andrea's reached out to me. She's not all over social media, but you can message me on my platform, Joseph KAJY. Send me a message. I'll connect you with her because she's out there actually helping people. Maybe somebody you know that's struggling. But if you're talking to somebody, what would you tell that person right now? Just that I fully understand it. And I know it's a lot of talk about God today. And you don't have to understand him, know him, believe in him, or even be able to embrace the fact that you could possibly connect with him. I mean, we're starting from ground zero. You're important. You're important. And whatever you've gone through, it can be fixed. And I've probably been through it too. I mean, I gave you just a small fraction of what the bottom that I was in. It was the cleaned up, real pretty version. So never heard a fifth step worse than mine. God loves you. I don't know who you are, but God loves you. And just by the grace of God, I love you too, and you don't have to do it alone. Don't ever try to walk this journey alone. I was not alone when I got here, and you don't have to be alone. We just want to be with you. We want to walk you through it. Man. Well, I'll tell you, you said you're being the light on your shirt. I promise you are being the light. I hope so. I'm so glad God you came on here to share. I definitely think, regardless whether somebody's out there, they're just dealing with their own stuff and they got something. I know both of us prayed before we got here. Amen. For God to speak to somebody. So if God spoke to you, I'd like you to share this with somebody who may need to hear it. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to get the message out to people who just may need to hear it. It may be one person that needs to hear it, but if you know somebody that can get something from this podcast or this message, please share it with them. And again, thanks for letting us share.